And we are live. Welcome everyone to the NDILC principle number 7. So excited. Here we are, July 11th. We're already in Q3. It is, listen, never assume anything about anyone. Everyone has their own story that makes them who they are. So I want to welcome our esteemed council. We have Marty Dutch up in the left. We have Tammy Bunnell. We have Teresa Powell-Smith. And we have Dr. Vanessa Montanales. I think I said that right, but whatever. We're there. I got it going. Yes, yes, yes. So the cool thing about it is that what we're trying to do today is really talk about something that I'm very, very passionate about. And that is how I advanced my career in the concept of active listening. And so one of the things I want to do is I want to open it up to actually say what happened with ChatGPT. So ChatGPT came out and I ran it. And the reason I wanted to put that out there is I wanted to see what actively is going on in the space. If we were to say, what is NDILC, what is the principle for listen to beyond that? And the thing I wanted to hear is that what was so interesting about it is that it came out and said, the very first thing is it said that, here we go, apologize, here we go. That's a great reminder. When we assume things about others without taking the time to understand their unique experiences and perspectives, we risk oversimplifying or misunderstanding who they truly are. Each person has a rich and complex story that has shaped their beliefs, values, and behaviors. By approaching others with an open mind and a willingness to listen, we can gain a deeper understanding of their backgrounds, motivations, and aspirations. Assumptions often stem from stereotypes, biases, or preconceived notions that they may not accurately reflect our individual's reality. By challenging our assumptions and embracing a non-judgmental attitude, we create space for genuine connections and empathy to flourish. Through active listening, we can uncover the nuances of someone's story, their challenges, triumphs, and influences that have shaped their lives. And we're going to hear 2 of those later on this morning. In recognizing and respecting the diversity of experience and perspectives, we foster inclusivity, understanding, and appreciation for the richness of human existence. It allows us to move beyond superficial judgmental and engage in meaningful and authentic relationships. So let us remember to approach others with curiosity, compassion, and a guide desire to understand their unique shares. So that I would like to open up. We're going to start with Marty. You work in the philanthropic side, and right now things have never been more challenging into what's going on with climate, economics, trigger, the environment of the negative comments of cancer culture and the environment of the positivity as we go through it, especially with those challenges. So my question to you is that active listening part, how is important for you on the philanthropic side, dealing with the highest wealth in the family offices to the economics of hearing that? How does that, what are some of the challenges that you have encountered?
Well, I think what happens in the nonprofit sector is that you have you have donors who want to be generous and not really sure what they want to do or how they want to make impact. And then you have these nonprofits that really need their funding and want to put a good case forward to, attract their attention. And I think one of the areas where using a consultant like myself comes into play is that we try and set up environments so that active listening can happen. Because when you enter into being a donor, sometimes there's preconceived notions that they haven't considered. And so we've got to give them time to learn and understand, how difficult it is for a nonprofit to run their business and what it takes to make that happen. And B, what is the best relationship between those two so that they both have a positive outcome? And that can only happen from having, open dialogue where you listen. And the other thing I would say is typically, like today, this week I've got an appointment with a client. He's in his 80s. He has no planning done. He doesn't have any heirs that will get his estate. He knows he would like it to go to philanthropy, but he's done nothing in his planning to make that happen. And he's not clear about what philanthropy he wants to do. So, and quite often, surprisingly, that's the starting point on a lot of the conversations I have, is that they've been working really hard their whole lives they've had their head down, but they haven't really listened to themselves, knowing that they know internally that they should get the planning done, but then, done the research to listen to where are the problem points in the world, how can they help? And, we set up listening tours so we can go out and take a donor out to meet nonprofits, to see what's happening in the community, so that they can start deciphering what is hitting their heart, what area would they want to support, how would their money be best leveraged. But it all starts with listening and having a conversation. It rarely, when there's a donor who comes in and there's people that are bossy with their money, they have a checkbook, they see the world and this is how it should be changed. This is what I want you to do with my money. That's a very difficult position for a nonprofit to be in, because sometimes they should say no, because it's not aligned with their values, or it'll take them on mission drift, but you're setting up a situation that without great listening skills can do damage.
Excellent. Well, I've never heard of it called a listener. I think that's fantastic. I love that concept. So Tammy, you're out there, you went from the CEO to the co-chair, and you really have to see the future and really project trends and the infrastructure that's going. And we see it at all-time low in the inventory out there right now. So that listening part and how you can give value back to your the professionals that you work with, and then also the value add for the company structure. What helps you to help them listen, to adapt to new projects and products and services, and to the pulse of the environment that you have would like to share?
I was trying to make my own self quiet. I think that the most important thing, in order for people to listen, a conversation takes two people, right? And that means that we have give and take. And so often people are thinking about what they're going to say next, instead of really finding out what's important. And I think the more you can personalize it to those individuals, the better off. When you can catch them when there's something going on, like now with the market shift, there's some people that are really stressed. It's not me going up to them and saying, is there anything I can do? Because if you give them a yes or no opportunity for an answer, chances are they're just going to say no and move on. But if I can say, what can I do to be helpful to you today? Or what can I do to make your day a little better? Now I've opened them up for dialogue so that they can have a conversation. I try and keep them engaged as much as possible. And then when it's an opportunity for you to speak or for you to share information, they're absolutely going to be willing to listen, because they feel like they matter. While they're talking, if they stop because they're not sure, they're saying too much, or they don't know if they should go in anymore, go any deeper or go any further, because you've got to really try and meet people where they are. I always tell people, help me understand, tell me more, paint the picture for me, add to those so that you can really get them to go further than where they were, and they'll really share what's important. And then after you leave that meeting, whatever that meeting is, write down what you heard, so that the next time you have an opportunity to engage with that person, you can see how far they've gone, or see if that's issue's been resolved. And it's not always on the negative, right? I mean, it's asking people what their dreams are, sharing with them that we're going to focus on the solution. How can we be part of the solution so that there's a positive spin and they feel like there's hope. I believe that a leader's job is to deliver hope. And no matter what the circumstances are, we're supposed to help make more leaders and better leaders, right? Not just get people to follow us. And the only way we can do that is really if we let them matter. There's two books that I found really help with listening that most people won't think in those directions, but it's really just to make us as humanly possible. One is by Bob Goff, and it's called Everybody Always. And it's literally leading from a position of love. And so if I have that vibration sent out to you, you're probably going to be more likely to be open to me. But that every person that's in front of you is important, not just looking to who's that next person that I've got to go see or I've got to go talk to. And this is probably one of my favorite books of all time, and it's called Humans Are Underrated. And it was written by Jeff Colvin, and it's all because of all this AI and all, it's not just AI, all the technology. It's so much easier for somebody to just, I call it phoning it in, but it's actually better to have a phone call, right? That they just send an email and it's just easier. It's done. It's off the checklist. And people distance themselves a tremendous amount during COVID. And there's an awful lot of lonely people that don't do well working from home. There are an awful lot of people that haven't actually really re-engaged with people. And so we're seeing this tremendous amount of struggle. And if you can really find out where their talents lie, where their gifts are, meeting them where they are, and not just technology is supposed to help me to be more effective and more efficient. It is not supposed to replace me. And it's supposed to make our companies more effective and more efficient. All of those systems in place can make things more effective and more efficient, but that should actually be so that we can be in front of people more often for the really important stuff.
I love that, more important stuff. For those who don't know, Tammy is an avid book reader. So when she says this is probably one of her all-time favorites of the Humans Are Underrated, that is a powerful "you must buy" comment. So just want to put it out there. Teresa, so you're the Chief Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Officer. You think about the listening factor, you think about the dynamics and the trigger craziness that we're doing. And I can't wait to get to Indira, the conversation that we had in our private one. The act of listening for you is got to be very, very dynamic because there's so much that's going on. So what are the tools or what are the conversation that you would like to share that you have found that's been very pivotal for you?
Yeah, so Tammy, first of all, I love that point that you made about humans and cannot replace technology. And I just want to comment on that because it's so true. There's nothing more important than the human touch, right? And we're yet to come close to having that within robotics. But one of the things that when I came to work for Gino Blafari, and I'm going to give him some kudos, one of the things that he did unbeknownst to me was ask me 18 questions. It was over a period of time. It wasn't all at once, that are known as the interview questions. And it's not interview, it's inner, like your interview. And what it does is that, and we do use this tool every single month. We have accountability partners that we're assigned to. And one of the things that we are required to do is to go through those 18 interview questions and it be organic, right? Those 18 questions that you really get to know the person that's your accountability partner a little bit more. Sometimes those biases form in, you think you know somebody, and you're really good at listening. Because I know when we did our interview, right, questions about my growing up and how did I become the person I am today, that's really what connects us all, right? That interview questions. And it starts off with simple questions like, tell me, what do you do? Like, what's your role? We all assume that we know each other's roles, but what is your role really? What do you do? How'd you get started? Where are you originally from? What else do you do besides work? What's your current family situation? What was your family situation growing up? What kind of memories do you have about your childhood? What's one memory that stands out? Were you active in school? I mean, there's a lot of questions that we now get to know that individual even more personally because we're really diving into each other. And it's also reciprocal. It comes back, the questions come back to us, and we're able to kind of get to know people a little deeper and start to know their story and what makes them. And then the last question, which I think it's all 18, and I'll be glad to send them to anyone who wants them, is when your life is over, how do you want to be remembered? And so it starts with these simple questions, goes very deep, and truly get to know our colleagues within our company. And, like you were saying, Desiree, you write them down, or Tammy, you write down those those important points so that you can recall them when you meet with somebody, because you're going through 12 people in a month. But think about the impact that it has if you did that with every client you got to know, with any individual agent that you are working with. To know them truly is really to be able to relate and also make a difference. So I think for me, that's one thing that I've learned from Gino that has been very beneficial, and it's allowed me to really impact and really get to know people differently, and also find commonality with every single person that I connect with.
Well, I love the idea that Teresa and Tammy about the information to get the deeper dive. And I found that my knack is to get people to say things that they wouldn't tell anyone else, right, Indira? Sorry for those, he's a lawyer, so there's a lot of dirt other than go there. But for everyone else, you know that my niche is to get people to open up. So by exposing your own vulnerabilities, it allows us to share that if I'm willing to pull down my veil, that everyone else can do the same thing and have that veil, the comfort zone to do the safe zone in that. And it's right now, it's how you make someone feel, not what you say, but that environment. And Tammy, I love the bedside manner of individuality to every single person, to be able to not confuse, because it's one thing to really try to understand and see how they progress, but oh, that wasn't you, that was someone else, so to understand and to really connect and have that pinpoint to that person by taking those notes, because there's so much going on in our minds right now, to have that formality, put it to what you're talking about, Teresa, to those questions. And that's where in my She Centerfolds that I've done, like we had the 50th episode for you. We're at 52, I believe, episodes for the magazine of She Centerfolds. And to that, I've always made sure a point that I dug so deep that everyone revealed something that they have never told their best friend, or something that's come out. And the emotional, I'm not gonna say cry, but the feeling that we leave is to the day that's so powerful. All right, so Vanessa, you have done in such incredible things, from dealing from the different job movements and careers that you have expanded. And the word listen, you came from when you were working at Chase, you did the REO division. That's how we initially met. And you really had to deal with the needs of the transitional market. And then you went in and you rose to the national level in several different banks. And now you're in a Hollywood entertainment celebrity enterprise, but you're dealing with the affordable home ownership in that piece that you've created. So you've had to listen to the last 20 some years of the pain points that you have now the opportunity to create your own product and service, which is such an incredible feat. And the idea is that you've had to do all this listening all this time, this active listening, and not design something from 30 years ago, but you have to design something not for the now, but for the future that you could use now, because by the time you rolled it out. So tell me about that and what that active listening portion of it.
So it really is knowing your craft and listening, right? So we have 2 ears and 1 mouth. So we have to listen more and speak less. And it really starts with surrounding yourself with incredible talent and also incredible partners in the community. So, for example, this is one example of being part of the NDILC, with having amazing leaders that have a real skill set on what's happening in their environment. Anything women related, I know I'm going to go to Desiree Patno. This is her passion. Then DEI, I know Teresa's a go-to. Real estate, I'm going to be looking at Tammy. So you really have to surround yourself with those that have their subject matter experts in their craft and they know what they're doing. On top of that, thankfully, we live in a global world that everything is at your fingertips with technology. So you know that you want to get more data and analytics, you're going to go to certain websites or certain think tanks like McKinsey Institute or Urban Institute. And then you also want to do a community advisory board. You want to have the best of the best small business, leaders in the community, minorities. So you want to have everyone inclusive to listen. What does the community need? What is those pain points? So we know we have a high cost. We live in a high cost area. Most areas are high cost now. The average sale price of a home, depending on the state, is pretty high. So when you're looking at the affordable lend space, which is where I'm at 80% median income, you're not going to qualify. So regardless of what legislation or rules apply, you have to be realistic and say, look, we have to look at 150%, 200% area median income to qualify people to buy homes. So you have to look for solutions and not think of now, but where we're going. And that is really by listening, by asking thoughtful leaders of their advice, and then start formulating a strategy, and then start looking at the numbers and what are they saying? What are those trends saying? We don't have a crystal ball, but you have to be inclusive of everyone, whether it's a high net worth individual, a celebrity status, or a first-time home buyer. Everyone is equally important in my book. I just know the affordable lens, and then I surround myself with that great talent. If I need data also with Freddie and Fannie Mae, the GSEs, I know who to call because that's their skill set. And then they have those tools available for all of us to use for free, whether we're a servicer or not. They have data at your fingertips. So you have to be really mindful. You have to look at every possible, and it's doing that research, right? That's what you have to do to make sure that you're representing every minority sector, and then those that are underserved and those where we have that gap. It's unacceptable to have a housing gap when we're not at 70%, and all these other ethnicities or other diverse groups are not where they need to be at parity. So that's what we look for, solutions. And that's where my focus is. How can we make that parity, and how can we, whether it's sex, whether it's diversity or ethnicity, we want to be an equal. And that takes listening, research, and then surrounding yourself with this amazing tribe of leaders that I call my friends.
I love that, in the sense that I was just sitting here listening to talk. If you think of Marty and you're very similar. Marty's dealing with the ultra high net worth family office, and she's dealing with the nonprofits and, and helping them. And here you're dealing with typically a celebrity is of an ultra high net worth individual of private wealth. And then you're dealing with affordable workforce housing, and you have to stage them to get to a place to where they can afford those homes into a program, let's say a 6-month or a 2-year program to savings and program allocations, right? So you're connecting that wealth gap, but also you've got to think that a lot of the, the surrounding tribe or group that works with the celebrities, they're not going to be of that status that can afford that. So you both are connecting from both ends. So that's very, very cool. So Indira is like, okay, what do I got down the path for her? So Indira is a lawyer, worked for the DOJ, worked for homelessness, worked for all these different cases. And if you think about, I think one of the greatest attributes that Indira has to me is her personality to really hone in on getting to the core of the person, to get them to understand, forget the fundamentals. She's excellent at the fundamentals, but to understand the personal strengths, to get them to understand that this is the right thing to do, considering the circumstances, what they can do within the given of the law and everything else. And to that passion, Indira, you have to really listen to and read the room and read what's going on to make that judgment call. I know I personally experienced it and have seen you do that with several others. So what tips that you can share about that active listening and how important it is in your career and you're as a mother? Actually, after 2 weeks of conversation ago.
Yeah. No, I think, the nature of a lawyer, people hone in on it as being an advocate, and lawyers usually hone in on that as speaking all the time. Right. And it's hard to be in a space with lawyers because that's what they do mostly is speak. And I think in order to really be an advocate, you have to, one, be able to know what is in your client's heart and head. And two, do your best to understand what is in their adversary's heart and head. And in order to do that, I think effectively, is you have to take a position of extreme humility and almost try to erase yourself from the situation in order to absorb. It's exhausting. It's really active listening means holding a lot of water for your client and, carrying those buckets of water as you go into a negotiation or as you try to advocate for them. So, I think it involves an extreme form of humility. And I think lawyers sometimes forget that. We're the ones who are supposed to speak, but really we are supposed to be a mouthpiece for what our clients want and need in a very adversarial setting. Whether it be the courtroom, whether it be in settlement mediation, whether it be negotiating with the government or something like that. So it is like Vanessa said, 2 ears and 1 mouth. And it is a lot of how you make other people feel, like Teresa and Tammy were honing in on, because that's how you get information. And what has been hard, or a lesson learned, is not to value the information coming in, not to place a value on the mouth that's giving it to you. Give everything equal weight before you start putting the pieces together, both from your client and both from an adversary, to put it together, but not valuing the information at the very beginning, which is something we do. We make assumptions about what other people are saying to us. We make an assumption as to the value of what somebody is saying to us based on some implicit value we place on that other person. And so, I think that is the hardest part. Even I think a couple of times, who comes to the table to speak, even the values we place just at that initial level of whose voice matters where and when, it's very, very hard to erase that as a decision maker, to erase that value setting the outset. And I think that's part of listening, so that we can value everything being said equally sort of at the beginning, and then start putting it in its place. Then start putting the pieces together and saying, okay, this is the narrative that actually makes the most sense, that gets everybody to an agreement, that resolves a case, that will convince the judge. Judges oftentimes are some of those people we have to listen to as well, to understand what is their motivation. It's not always what we would assume it to be. And so those assumptions are really, really hard to do. And being, look, growing up and being on the receiving end of people making a lot of value assumptions about what I have to say or what I want to do, you learn, right? Like, I think all of us as women, you learn to listen because you've been on the receiving end, and you see, you see what happens when people don't listen openly and without ascribing value to what you have to say. So I think we're much better at that, just based on experience being on the short end of the stick sometimes. So it is a lot about humility. It is about erasing our opinions. Our job is, as lawyers, is to give an opinion. And I think for pretty much everybody here is to ultimately give an opinion and make a recommendation. I think that is a commonality with sort of everybody here on this call. Apologies for that. And so ultimately people want you to give an opinion, but it's a question of when you do that. And usually it's much further down the line after you have gathered a lot of information, probably beyond what your stakeholders or clients thought you would be doing initially. I think sometimes they just come to all of us, like, you're the expert, tell me what to do. And it's odd. Sometimes the answer is, well, no, let's talk about, let's gather information. And I think that is something that is undervalued as we go forward. And Tammy raising AI and sort of the implications, it's undervalued. It's that I can just type something into a question and get a response. Like ChatGPT will give me a response, right? But what the heck was it listening to develop that response? Like, what is AI drawing from? And I'm not sure that human element is there yet to be able to discern information and listen. Listen without value and then discern it properly.
Absolutely right. Well, the other thing is that, there's so many different AI programs. You got Gamma, you got Bing, you could go down the line. And the idea is that, when I'm putting together something, I like to resource, and plug it into 3 or 4 different platforms to see how they populate them differently. And then I extrapolate, oh, I get that point. Now, this is completely wrong. I would never use you for this kind of scenario because each one has a different focus. So, but what I loved about what you said, Indira, is that you know, the tying in on, hey, I need to gather my thoughts and put an opinion without speaking, but I need to save it for that moment. So when it's so important to say it and how to say it, you know, we heard from Mika and several other people that, you know, they have voice coaches to talk. You basically are a speaking time criteria as a lawyer, when and appropriate to speak, because I know that we've had several conversations, how you talk, you know, when you're in front of a stage versus in how you are in a personal life. He says, Desiree, I have my lawyer speak and I have my friendship speak. And we've heard that from Erica, you know, that, you know, if she has her military speak, I mean, when she puts on her uniform, the way her position, her body, her voice is 1000% different than when she's on a Zoom or in person. So I believe that we have that moment of listening and that active listening and how we convert our family. And so I think this is going to tie in directly into our video that I found. It's the active listening for the world as it is. And so I'm going to play this real quick. You know, I'm just really good at this. So we're going to pull it off here and we're going to try it out here. I guess it would be helpful if I hit the share button before we go there. And we don't need to go into, here it is. Nope, it's on the wrong page. Can we see each other on Facebook? You like that one, right? Hang on here. Stop sharing. I'm trying a very dark room, so bear with me here to see where I can share it. I'm not sure why I can't. Here we go. Nope. Okay, so we're going to try this out. I'm going to stop sharing for a second here. And I'm going to pull you down. I'm going to go find the page and we're going to see it. It's right here. How come it's not allowing it to cancel? All right, so while we're doing this, Marty, go ahead and talk about, you have some interesting things, and I'll interrupt you as soon as I find it. Apologize. So you have some things that are going on. Here it is. It's on this page. Don't ask me why it's out here. What's going on in as far as active listening for, okay, I just got it. Sorry. I'm going to go ahead. I apologize. I got it now. The last time you could ask me to do this kind of stuff. We are now in, here we go. So I'm in Newport, Rhode Island. I'm at an Opal conference. It's pouring down rain. I can hear it in the background. Here we go. I have it. We're expanding it. We're ready to go. Go for
Being
it.
positive has become a new form of moral correctness. In a survey I recently conducted with over 70,000 people, I found that a third of us, either judge ourselves for having so-called bad emotions, like sadness, anger, or even grief, or actively try to push aside these feelings. We do this not only to ourselves, but also to people we love, like our children. We may inadvertently shame them out of emotions seen as negative, jump to solution, and fail to help them to see these emotions as inherently valuable. Normal, natural emotions are now seen as good or bad. But when we push aside normal emotions to embrace false positivity, we lose our capacity to develop skills to deal with the world as it is, not as we wish it to be. I've had hundreds of people tell me what they don't want to feel. They say things like, I don't want to try because I don't want to feel disappointed. Or I just want this feeling to go away. I understand, I say to them, but you have dead people's goals. Only dead people never get unwanted or inconvenienced by their feelings. Only dead people never get stressed, never get broken hearts, never experience the disappointment that comes with failure. Tough emotions are part of our contract with life. You don't get to have a meaningful career or raise a family or leave the world a better place without stress and discomfort. Discomfort is the price of admission to a meaningful life.
Any comments?
I think it's so true. I mean, we all kind of numb ourselves and we think we need to be positive all the time. And that is really not how we actually learn, or we actually are able to share that we have those same feelings with others, right? And so really understanding, because people are saying, oh, you need to get over that, or, hey, that happened, a long time ago. But I think sometimes people do hold on to those experiences because it's who, it makes them, right? It makes them who they are. So I think, the comment about, the only people that don't have scenarios are dead people, right? I think that's so true because we all experience and we all need to listen and we all need to understand that we're all going through different life events. And so making sure that we are able to empathize and also help, come up with solutions for people when they are going through those events.
The world as it is. And Tammy, I know you're going to chime in real quick. What is the world as it is to you?
Well, I loved what she said about dead people. It was a reason and a catch for that, right? I mean, she told the story and she grabbed you with that. But I find that if you brush all your emotions aside, and it's still there somewhere, if somebody hasn't had the opportunity to talk it out, two things that have really worked for me business-wise and personally, even with my children and grandchildren. I have a window seat in my home and they know that that's the place they can say anything and not get in any trouble. And so now they literally specifically ask, can we go talk at the window? And they'll sit down and talk because they want to get feelings out, or maybe they made a mistake and they don't want anybody to know the mistake they made, or they feel like they've done something to disappoint someone. And so they can say it all out. No one's in trouble. You can just say whatever you want. And I'm just going to sit and listen for as long as it takes. And that has worked out really well. And it's gone to the next generation. That's really helped a lot. Business-wise, when I see people that are struggling and you're in an office or you're in an environment where there's too many people, it's really simple. You can recognize the emotions in someone. You can see when they're struggling. You can see when something's going on, or maybe you even know something's going on in their lives. It's okay to just take them either to a private area or say, let's go take a walk, because then they know that they're going to get your uninterrupted attention, right? They know that you're going to be paying complete attention, or you wouldn't pull them aside to say, let's go take a walk, so that they can get their feelings out and they can say stuff. It will just build up. It's, if you have a cut and you don't handle it, it's going to end up infected. And if you don't handle it again, you're going to end up having a limb removed, right? The same thing happens with all the things that you bury underneath. So getting it out is really important. And people like to see that transparency. And frankly, even from us, if they can see that we're a little bit vulnerable, that we've been through things, that we can admit that we're not perfect, and that every day isn't simple, then it opens them up to be able to say what's on their mind too.
I love the active listening was not just the audio side, as you said, see people that need to do it, right? So active listening can be all your sensories, not just the audio. And to your point about the infection, my great grandfather actually died from gangrene because he was supposed to go see an infection on his toe, refused to go see it done. By the time they got done, they went to cut the leg off, and by then after it was too late and he passed away. So it's so important to those examples that you gave, Tammy. Anyone else would like to comment on that?
I did like the video because you don't know happiness until you have sadness. So you can't appreciate the happiness if you have sadness. So you have to have the yin yang. You have to have both feelings in order to appreciate the goodness. Like you need to have bad in order to appreciate the good. And when she said, oh yeah, you have to be dead, that's completely true. So recently I found myself in a situation that I should have been more thoughtful of what I said in my surroundings. I had a private conversation to a gentleman that I respect and admire. And little did I pay attention to my surroundings that somebody else overheard. It was unintentional, but I think we also have to be very proactive to listening, and then also see your surroundings, who's in that circle around you before you're going to speak, or be thoughtful and mindful of everything around you. So you, just to everyone's point, you have to see your surroundings, be thoughtful, listen. And if you're going to speak something, depending on the context, see where you are in the environment. And that's really important. And that's something that I've learned as I keep moving in my surroundings. I'm very cognizant now of who's in my surroundings, because not only that, it can record you as well. So be mindful, look at your surroundings, and before you speak, see if anyone's else listening when it's a private conversation. To Tammy's point, if it's something that is meant to be private, then take that person away and make sure that there's no one else in the surroundings, because the last thing you want to do is hurt someone else or misinterpret. So that's something that I've learned painfully here in the last few months.
Don't bring your phone when you want it to be completely private, because remember, your phone is always listening to everything you say, and you never know what you say in private can be on that phone, even if the phone is unrecorded and everything's shut off, because it still has a speaker that's active. So if you have apps, whether it be Facebook or any social media apps, your phone is still always active listening. That's how they get a hold of you to say, hey, I want to go to Chicago. I want to go to the Bahamas. I want to go on a vacation. You start getting ads that are fed. So make sure you have no electronic device within that sphere that can hear you, whether it's on or off to go with it. So I just want to add that. Indira and Marty, would you like to add anything to what you've got out of the TED Talk?
Go ahead,
Marty.
You're good. Go ahead.
All right, one of you go. Indira, go. Marty's been on every week. Indira, go.
Okay. I think I really liked what she had to say. And I think there is something, I don't know, I only know our culture. Maybe it's global, but that, and I'm a big fan of, so I'm a big fan of sci-fi and fairy tales and what I read and fiction wise and watch and everything. But we have this overall narrative, right? Good is always like the good and the positive, like that's the end of the story always. And so sometimes we like to jump to the good stuff too quickly, and we erase all of that. And like Vanessa says, you need to have both of that. You need to have a yin and yang. You need to have both sides in order to have a complete story. You can't just jump to the good stuff. And I know that it seems happier, and we're told and fed through narratives and everything, that's what we're supposed to hold on to. But that's not real, and that's not actual. And when we don't allow people to express that full bad, all the bad stuff, then we are erasing their narrative, and because we want them to fit into ours, which is the good stuff. And so I think that part of active listening, and the term I always use, or somebody gave to me, which is holding water. It's really heavy to hold these buckets of water for somebody else, and that's their pain, and that's their hurt, and that's all the bad stuff. But you hold it for them so that they can't, you have to hold that space for them. Or I love the idea of the talking space by the windowsill, right? You have to have a space where people can sit. If people don't have anywhere to put it, we have huge issues with mental health, with miscommunication. I mean, there's all those things. But yeah, we can't just jump to the good stuff all the time, because it's not real and it's not honest. And we're not giving people an opportunity to be their real selves. So it's okay. Like, and I've had clients who've done really horrible things. Like, it's okay. Like, everybody does really horrible stuff. And it doesn't mean they deserve something less than, doesn't mean that they deserve less treatment or less value. But, I think that's why I really appreciated what she was saying.
Very good. Well, you look at the ecosystem, that's the whole thing is that Tony Moss, as we heard yesterday, is really about the core of making sure that the full story, the full impact is being heard to go with that. So Marty, your comments.
Well, I think what I heard in what the video brought out was there's a huge movement in the school systems to train the teachers in trauma-informed care, which means they're training them to understand that the behavior that's being exhibited in that moment may not be reflective of what's really happening. It was what happened before they got to school. So, and I think that's every conversation, is that, you know, I'm sure you all have been in situations where you're listening to someone who is very upset and is expressing it to you, and it doesn't feel like it's an appropriate amount of anger or frustration for what's going on. But quite often it's all of everything that they're bringing to the table, and or past hurts that this situation is triggering. And I used to, I remember my husband and my son were kind of going at it for a season. And I said to my son, I go, buddy, let me ask you something. What do you think your dad's buttons are? And I said, when I mean a button, it's like you say something and it just lights him up, where, you know, it's not his reaction to whatever you're doing is so much more than what's really happening. And I said, do you know what those buttons are? I go, what do you think they are? And he said, he said, yeah, it's really all about, you know, him wanting to know that you appreciate. So it's appreciation for what is happening, and the support and accountability. And I said, okay, so you know the buttons, but why are you pushing them? And, you know, that just reflection just changed everything in the house, because I just said, for some reason, you're in a moment where you're choosing to hit your dad in certain points where the response you're going to get is so much more than what's really happening. So you have a choice to make. Like, do you want to push that button, or you want to, you know, go at it a different way? And I said the same thing to my husband, you know, so that everybody's got their buttons, you know, and when you understand what that is, then the communication changes, because you realize that, you know, and I'm sure every day we've got these friends, like I've got friends I do not talk about with politics. I won't even go near it. When someone starts talking politics to the table, I'm starting to back up. It's like, no, you know, there's people I won't talk religion. Can't do it. We're not going to, you know, and those conversations are hard. But in some of the techniques, you know, as we start working through this, because I've never been in a time where I couldn't sit at a table with someone who wasn't politically aligned with me and not have a great conversation. But there's people that feel like when they sit down, they need to convert me to something, and I can feel it. And the only way I can stay at the table and remain engaged is that I think to myself, okay, I'm just curious. I want to be curious. How did they arrive at this opinion? You know, what is it about? How do I learn something from this so I can understand this line of thinking? And then it ratchets down my need to be right, or to try and convince them of something, because it's not going to happen, you know. And you know, I had a girlfriend who was going off on, she was talking about that there's all these books and libraries and schools that our children are reading that are inappropriate. And she was just really, you know, kind of coming at me saying, you should care about this. You should do something about this. And I said, can I ask you a question? Do you think it's possible? And I said, just possible, that we've taken a small amount of situations, a small amount of books, maybe exaggerated the depth of this problem. Do you think it's possible that maybe this is being blown out of proportion? And she took a deep breath, looked at me and said, no. I said, okay, well, you know, we're not gonna, you have to sometimes just disengage, because I think it's possible, because I don't think everything is everything all. Those words, you know, to me are non-starters. When you're lumping everything in and everyone and all, that's not possible. But just understanding the conversation, to be curious and to try. Some people were not going to get there, but you know, listening to try and understand. I'm always kind of fascinated, because this woman, we're at such polar opposites, that I'm kind of fascinated by it, where, you know, how do two educated women, you know, have just such polar opposite views of the same situation that happened. Like I see it one way and she's describing it another way. I'm like, I'm fascinated how we experienced the same exact thing and we came up with these two completely different outcomes in our head. And if we're not curious, then, you know, I've got to be open to the fact that I could be wrong and that maybe I'm missing something. And I think that that's what's happening is we're all shutting down so hard that we're not thinking of what could be possible.
You hit the key word, Marty. Curious is active listening, to continue that conversation, to have it. And it's interesting, but I just want to say, could you imagine having Marty as a mother and sitting here and analyze a situation as all these came around, how she frames it and puts it down, and you have Tammy says, there's your time room that you can talk, instead of time out that you can't speak, it's time in that you get to speak whatever you want that's in that room. You know, if you think about the time out, time in, I think it's really cool how that goes down. So that being said, this perspectives that we all came of and the active listening for me is really about the conversation of you can advance your careers, you can advance your personal life, you can be better stewards of being in the quality of life and not being the dead person and not having feeling and going where you fear the most and the most uncomfortable position you can be in. But it helps you be stronger and better stewards as you go forward, because life gets very complex as you age, in addition to being in clear mind, but also being around those that you can help. Because remember, if you can give one tip or one trade to help someone, that could be a game changer for them. And the simplest thing you do. So we're out of time. I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. This has been incredible, like it is every month. And so everyone who's listening, these are on YouTube. Yes, they're going out there. So make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel for the NDILC, and we'll post a recap on it. And our next one's going to be present. And this is for the month of August. Sharing your time is one of the most valuable gifts you can give. Do with intention by truly being present. Marty, you're going to be hosting that for us. I'm very excited about that. And as you can see, as we heard from this TED Talk about see the world as it is. And I believe that we are the greatest time we're living in life, but the challenges are also some of the greatest challenges that we're seeing, but with the council, and we're problem solution solvers. So if you have something you'd like to comment, reach out to us, reach out to the counselor, anyone that you see on this incredible call, and see what we can do to help, because that's what our core is, to be a problem solver, to help society and as we move forward. So I want to thank you all. Have an incredible day, and let's get this going. So thank you all. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, everyone.